Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching it from? And what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoyed this story. Tonight, let yourself sink into a world of quiet magic and mystery, where the candlelight flickers gently across ancient pages and soft footsteps echo between shelves of forgotten spells. This is a tale for dreamers, for those who find wonder in whispers and secrets tucked away behind library doors long closed. As the world around you slows and the night deepens, breathe in and breathe out. Let your shoulders fall. Let the thoughts of the day drift away like autumn leaves on the black lake. You're safe here. You're seen. And you are about to begin a journey through the enchanted halls of Hogwarts in a story called The Secret in the Forbidden Library. So, close your eyes, or leave them half-lidded in the hush of lamplight. Let the story find you. Let sleep gently follow. Let's begin. The rain fell in soft, silver threads, weaving its lullaby against the tall, arched windows of Ravenclaw Tower. Each drop tapped gently, as if asking permission to be let in, a sound so delicate it seemed part of a dream. Outside, the spires of Hogwarts rose like silent sentinels into the mist-shrouded night, their outlines blurred by the curtain of falling rain. The sky was a vast stretch of velvet, deep blue and endless, lit only by the faint shimmer of stars flickering through the cloud breaks. You were still half asleep when the sound woke you, not the rain itself, but the way it mingled with something quieter, something beneath it. A whisper, not quite spoken. You opened your eyes to darkness, the kind that felt alive, not oppressive but watchful. The dormitory around you was hushed, filled with the slow, even breaths of your fellow students still lost in their dreams. The fire in the hearth had long since dwindled to a soft orange glow, casting sleepy shadows that danced lazily across the stone walls. You sat up slowly, your blanket falling to your lap like a sigh. The sound was there again, faint but unmistakable, a page turning. It came from the foot of your bed, too deliberate to be the wind. You squinted into the dim, and there, nestled just beneath the edge of your trunk, was a glint of old parchment, its edge curling like a leaf left too long in the sun. Curious, you reached for it. Your fingers brushed the paper, and the air shifted around you, as if the room were holding its breath. It was a map, small, square, and ancient. The ink shimmered faintly in the low light, etched in looping script you didn't recognize. A slender line of silver thread traced a path through the castle, from the Ravenclaw common room down into the heart of the school, ending at a place you'd only ever heard about in whispers, the restricted section of the Hogwarts library. No, not just that, past even the gates of the restricted section, into the deeper archives where few dared venture. The map pulsed once under your fingertips, as though recognizing your touch. Then it stilled, leaving only the echo of that pulse in your chest. You should have left it there. You should have tucked it back beneath your trunk, turned over, and let the lullaby of rain draw you back into sleep. But something in you stirred. A quiet knowing. A pull not unlike the one you'd felt the first time your wand had chosen you. You stepped out of bed, bare feet finding cold stone. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of rain-soaked stone and something older, something you couldn't name. You moved carefully, each step slow and deliberate so as not to wake the others. The map trembled lightly in your hand, the ink glowing a little brighter with each step toward the common room door. The spiral staircase was empty, coiling downward like the inside of a conch shell. The castle was sleeping, but it was never silent. There were sounds, always sounds, the groan of ancient beams settling, the rustle of portraits adjusting themselves, the distant hush of the lake lapping against the stone foundations. You welcomed these sounds now, for they grounded you, kept you tethered as your heart beat faster. In the common room, the windows stretched high, tracing the curve of the tower. Rain still whispered against them, gentle and ceaseless. The fire had burned low, but embers still glowed, giving just enough light to see the shadows of shelves, chairs, and the high back of your favorite reading nook. That's when you saw him, Amari, seated in that very chair, one leg crossed over the other, a book open in his lap. He did not look up when you entered, as if your presence were already accounted for. I thought you'd find it tonight, he said quietly, his voice like silk touched by winter. You hesitated, then stepped closer, the map still clenched in your hand. You left it for me? No, he said, eyes still on the page. But I knew it would come to you. It always does, eventually. The fire crackled softly. You looked at him, his face half-shadowed, expression unreadable. There was always something unknowable about Amari. He had a stillness to him, a sense that he had seen further down the path than anyone else, and had chosen silence rather than sharing what he knew. What is this? You asked, voice barely louder than the rain. He closed the book gently, setting it aside. A beginning, he said. Or an end, depending on what you decide to do. You felt the weight of the map then, not just in your hand but in your thoughts, in the space behind your ribs. You looked down at it, at the ink still glowing faintly. The line on the map had begun to move again, slowly, beckoning you forward. You're coming with me? You asked. Amari stood, his movements fluid and noiseless. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His presence was answer enough. As the two of you stepped out into the hallway, the door whispering shut behind you, you felt the change. The castle was the same, stone and archways and shadows, but also not. There was a thickness to the air, a watchfulness. The portraits along the corridor seemed asleep, but you felt their painted eyes shift as you passed. The path took you downward, always downward, the stones growing damper, the smell of earth and old ink rising. You descended past the classrooms, the grand halls, and into the lesser-known passages where few dared wander at night. Your only light came from the one in Amari's hand, its tip aglow with a soft, pulsing blue that cast delicate shadows. You reached the gray hallway that led toward the library's back entrance, the one rarely used, and only by those who knew the right enchantments. Amari traced a sigil in the air. The door creaked open, and that's when you heard it again. The whisper. Not from the map this time. Not from your own thoughts. From inside the library. Your feet moved before you could think, drawn to the sound. Past shelves that reached the ceiling, past locked cabinets filled with forgotten knowledge. The whisper called to you, not urgent, not loud, but persistent. Like the rain, like breath, like memory. You stopped in front of a familiar bookshelf, and there it was, a single book, protruding ever so slightly, the leather of its spine cracked with age. You pulled it free. It was light, almost too light, as though hollow. There was no title. And when you opened it, the air shifted again. The ink inside shimmered, formed, changed. The words rearranged themselves, and a name, your name, appeared at the top of the page. Below it, the outline of the spell. A spell written in a language you didn't know but somehow understood. It felt like hearing a lullaby from long ago, one you didn't remember learning. Amari stood behind you, silent. "What is this?" you asked again, but this time the question was softer, as if you were afraid of the answer. He didn't respond. Instead, he reached forward and touched the page. The book sighed, like something exhaling after a long, long time. And somewhere deep in the library, something moved. Not loudly. Not violently. Just enough. Enough to let you know you were not alone. Not anymore. And outside, the rain continued to fall, the sky breathing gently above Hogwarts, unaware, or perhaps not, that something very old had just begun to awaken again. The corridor beyond the library door was colder than it should have been. Not the sharp, biting chill of winter air, but something deeper, a cold that seemed to whisper along your skin and settle in your bones. It smelled faintly of stone wet with time, of forgotten parchment, and, strangely, of burnt wax. The scent drifted through the air like a memory, as if someone had snuffed out dozens of candles just moments before your arrival. You walked in silence beside Amari. Neither of you spoke. There was something sacred about the quiet now, as though sound itself might awaken things better left sleeping. The book you'd taken still rested in your arms, its cover warm despite the chill around you, its weight oddly comforting, as though it had decided it belonged with you now. Each step you took creaked against the ancient wooden floorboards. The castle shifted inside around you, the way old houses sometimes do, in language older than words. Somewhere distant, the echo of a bell rang, far too faint to be telling time. You weren't sure if it was real, or if it was simply the castle reminding you that time here bent easily and never in your favor. You turned a corner past a tapestry depicting a wizard with an armful of stars, and that was where you found Callan. He was seated on the floor beneath a narrow, dust-caked window, knees drawn to his chest, one clutched tightly in one hand. The other half of the wand, the broken half, lay beside him like a splintered feather. His eyes widened when he saw you, panic blooming across his face before recognition softened the lines. "I thought I heard something," he whispered hoarsely. "Something, humming." You exchanged a glance with Amari, who gave nothing away, and knelt down beside Callan. His fingers twitched around the wand, knuckles pale. "Why are you down here?" you asked gently, though a part of you already knew. This place, this air, it called to people. Some could ignore it. Others couldn't. Callan shook his head slowly. "I couldn't sleep. My hand hurt." He held it up, and you noticed a faint red mark along his palm. A burn, shaped like the rune you'd just seen in the book. It appeared while I was dreaming. You stared at it, then at the book in your arms. The mark on his skin mirrored the one inked on the first page. Something invisible and ancient connected them. Connected all of you. "We're going to the restricted section," you said, the words leaving your mouth before you had time to doubt them. Callan's laugh was a short, nervous burst. "You too? Now? At this hour? You do realize there's something we need to find," Amari interrupted, voice calm, the way the sea sounds before a storm. "And something that's already found us." Callan looked between you, eyes flickering with familiar fear. But then he did what he always did. He swallowed his panic, got to his feet, and nodded. He picked up the broken half of his wand, cradling both pieces like something beloved and long-suffering. Together, the three of you continued down the corridor. The floorboards groaned beneath your weight, each creak like a hush that didn't quite succeed. Candles flared to life as you passed. One by one, their flames blue-white, casting pale halos on the walls. The library was far behind now. You were deeper in the castle than you'd ever gone before, below even the potions dungeons. Here, the walls were closer together, the ceilings lower. You could feel the age of the place in the way the air pressed against your skin. Dust hung in the light like ghosts caught mid-breath. As you turned another corner, you caught the scent again, burnt wax. Stronger this time. And something else, a sound like pages turning in a room with no wind. You stopped, and the others did too. "That's not us," Callan said, almost too quietly to hear. Amari raised his wand. The tip flared slightly, casting light across a wide wooden door. It looked out of place here, ornate, with golden hinges and an engraving of a phoenix mid-flight. There was no handle, just a small indentation, shaped like a handprint. The rune on Callan's palm glowed faintly. Without a word, he stepped forward and pressed his hand to the door. It clicked open. The air inside the room was warmer, almost pleasant, and smelled richly of melted candles and spiced parchment. The room was round, with walls lined top to bottom in books, scrolls, and strange artifacts sealed behind glass. A fire crackled in a hearth that hadn't been lit a moment ago, casting flickers of gold across the curved floor. But the center of the room was what caught your breath. A single pedestal stood there, bathed in the light of a chandelier that hung without chains, floating just beneath the ceiling. Upon the pedestal rested a book nearly identical to the one you carried, except older, and radiating a soft, rhythmic pulse. Like a heartbeat. Callan backed away instinctively. "That's it," he said. "That's the hum I heard." You stepped closer. The book had no title. Its leather was worn smooth with age, the corners frayed, the latch rusted. But something about it sang to you, not in sound, but in sensation. Like the memory of being called home through fog. You didn't touch it. You turned to Amari, who had been studying the walls. "There's more here," he said, pointing to a series of diagrams etched into the stone. "This isn't just a library. It's a vault." You followed his gaze. The diagrams showed constellations aligned with one movements, sigils interwoven with runes and blood. Some were familiar, taught in the higher levels of arithmancy. Others were impossible, overlapping in ways that defied known magic. Callan hovered near the door, casting glances back into the hallway. "I don't like this," he muttered. "I really don't." You moved toward the pedestal. Just as your hand hovered above the book, you heard it again. The whisper. Not words. Not language. A feeling. A presence. Something behind the walls. You turned. A shadow moved just beyond the reach of the firelight. Not quickly. Not threateningly. But it moved. As if acknowledging you. Then it was gone. Amari stepped beside you. "It knows we're here," he said softly. You looked down at the book. The glow was stronger now, in time with your heartbeat. This place wasn't just hiding knowledge. It was waiting. And you had just knocked. The door did not close behind you. It remained open, as though the room itself were undecided, unsure whether to welcome or warn you. The fire burned steadily in the hearth, casting a honey-colored glow that softened the stone walls, but there was a stillness to the air now that hadn't been there before. It wasn't absence, but presence held just beyond the edge of perception, like someone watching you from behind a veil. You stared at the book on the pedestal, its pulse slowing, sinking to yours, as if waiting for the moment your intentions would match its own. Callan stayed near the wall, chewing at a thumbnail, his breath shallow. His eyes flicked from shadow to shadow, never quite resting. "What if we shouldn't be here?" he asked, and though his voice was small, it was not cowardice you heard, it was memory. Some part of him already knew the cost of opening doors. Amari stood still, his expression unreadable, but you noticed his hands were no longer calm. One thumb rubbed slowly against the curve of his wand, not in fear, but in calculation. You'd seen him like this only once before, the night during second year when the staircases had misaligned and trapped 3 students between floors for hours. When everyone else had panicked, Amari had simply waited for the right moment, for the right opening. It was how he moved through the world, not reacting, but listening. You took a step toward the pedestal, your fingers brushing the edge of the book's cover. And everything changed. The walls didn't shift. The fire didn't die. But something deeper twisted, like turning a key in the lock of an old memory. The floor beneath you sighed. Not wood. Not stone. Breath. The room was remembering you. And you were remembering something too. A sensation, brief, like a blink, washed over you. You were younger, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the great hall during your first sorting ceremony. There had been a moment, a flicker, when the sorting hat had almost spoken a word you didn't understand. Not a house. Not even English. A name, or maybe a title. And then it had changed its mind. That flicker returned now, like a shadow falling across your mind again. The same word, half-formed. Velrun. You didn't know what it meant. But the book did. You opened it. The first page was no longer blank. The same strange script from the map appeared, looping across the parchment like ivy. It shimmered faintly, the ink almost alive. This time, you didn't need to decipher it. You simply knew. The spell of remembering. The one that finds the forgotten name. The one that returns the unspoken. The air around you shimmered with scent, burnt wax, yes, but also dried flowers, singed feathers, and old ink. You had the sudden feeling of being inside a memory not your own. One that was trying to bloom again. Behind you, Callan whispered, "It's writing on its own." And it was. Each page turned with no hand, revealing more lines, more glyphs. They grew darker, heavier. You could feel them thick in the air. Then you heard it again, the turning of a page where no book was open. From the far side of the room. Callan flinched. "There's something else here." You closed the book. The sound stopped. Amari moved to the other side of the room, where a tall cabinet stood cloaked in shadow. Its glass was fogged, and inside, something glowed faintly red. You followed him, the wooden floor beneath your steps exhaling dust with each footfall. The cabinet opened with a groan. Inside, on a worn velvet cushion, lay a wand. It was long, slender, darker than mahogany, and veined with silver lines that spiraled down its length like veins of quartz. Floating above it, suspended in a globe of soft light, was a small shard of stone. It rotated slowly, like a tiny moon. "Do you feel that?" Amari asked. "You did." It wasn't just magic. It was memory, tangled, restless, thick with intent. Callan stepped forward, his broken wand in one hand. As he neared the cabinet, the shard above the wand pulsed. Just once. But in that brief flicker, you saw something reflected on its surface. A face. Not yours. Not Amari's. Not Callan's. An older man. Eyes like ash, lips moving in silent incantation. And behind him, shelves like those in this room. The same chandelier. The same fire. This was a place of casting, Amari murmured. Spells not just learned here. They were created. You swallowed. Created or contained? No one answered. The room was growing darker. Not from any extinguished light, but because something was shifting in the air. A pulling. You turned back to the pedestal. The book had opened again. Not by your hand. The pages were turning, faster this time, until they stopped on a diagram. A rune. Circular. Layered with inner sigils, each one more complex than the last. And in the center of the diagram, your name. Carved in the ink. Burned into the page. "Why is it doing this?" Callan asked, his voice thin. "You didn't know." But the rune, it called to something inside you. Then, the whispering returned. Stronger. This time, it spoke. Not in words. Not exactly. But in understanding. As though it was pressing its meaning directly into your chest. "Come further." Amari's eyes flicked to the far wall, where no door had been before. Now, there was one. Carved from stone, set with metal latches. Symbols danced faintly across it, some of them matching the ones in the book. The castle had shown you the next path. But it had not invited you. It had dared you. Callan backed away. "No. Not through there. I don't care what that book says, this place is wrong." You turned to him, slowly. "Then go back." But he didn't move. Because he couldn't. The door through which you'd come was gone. Vanished. Only stone behind you now. Trapped? Callan breathed. "No," Amari said softly, though his voice was heavy. "Not trapped. Chosen." The whisper came again. "Velrun." This time, the word was not in your mind. It was spoken aloud. By something behind the door. The rune on the page began to glow. The dust in the air swirled like breath held too long. And somewhere, beneath the stone of the room, the floor began to hum. Something was awakening. And you were no longer certain whether you were the one remembering, or the one being remembered. The hum did not fade, it deepened, vibrating in your bones like the final note of a long-forgotten song. It wasn't sound alone. It was memory, pressure, the tremble of something ancient exhaling after centuries of stillness. The stone door before you looked unchanged, unmoved, yet you felt its watching. Not like eyes, but like a place that knew it had been seen and had decided to see you back. None of you spoke for a moment. Callan had gone utterly still, his back pressed to the wall beside the extinguished hearth, the fire having died out as quietly as breath. His broken wand lay on the floor beside him, forgotten. He was staring at the door with a gaze so wide and vacant it seemed to belong to someone watching their own reflection vanish. His mouth opened once, then closed again. Amari was the first to move. Not a step forward, not a decision made. He simply shifted his weight, barely noticeable, the way a cat might when it senses the turning of the wind. "It's not locked," he murmured. "How do you know?" you asked, surprised at how calm your own voice sounded. He pointed to the sigils. "It's not bound shut. There's no locking room, no seal. Just a pause. A pause. As if the door itself was waiting to see what you would do next." Your hand itched to touch the book again, the one still open on the pedestal behind you, but a strange certainty filled you now. The answers you wanted were no longer on those pages. They had moved. The book was only a guide, not a destination. The next step was behind the door. "I'm not going," Callan said suddenly. His voice was clearer than before, and though it trembled, there was iron in it. "There's something behind that door, and it remembers us. I don't want to remember it." You turned to him. "We may not have a choice." "We always have a choice," he snapped. "That's the thing about old magic, it feeds on people who think they don't." You blinked. That didn't sound like Callan. Not the boy who nearly fainted at the sight of a boggart, who once apologized to a suit of armor for bumping into it. But now, there was something old in his voice. A trace of someone who had seen beyond the veil of Hogwarts' ordinary strangeness and lived to speak of it. Amari studied him for a long moment, then looked back to you. "You go," he said. You turned sharply. "What?" "Just you. Not both of us." "Not yet." His eyes had that same thoughtful distance they always did when he was calculating things far beyond the moment. "Some doors want one soul at a time." "And what if it closes behind me?" you asked. "Then it wasn't your door," he replied. You stared at him, the words heavy in your chest. But deep down, you knew he was right. You could feel it in the marrow of your bones that this was a crossing meant to be taken alone. With a breath that felt too shallow, you stepped toward the door. It didn't move. You raised your hand, slowly, and placed your palm flat against the stone. It was warm. Not from fire. Not from sun. But warm like flesh. Like something alive. There was no lurch, no blinding flash. The door simply parted. The stone unknit itself like fabric, unraveling grain by grain into darkness. Behind it, nothing but shadow. A corridor, or a cavern, or a chasm, it was impossible to tell. No light seeped in. It was a perfect, velvet dark. But it smelled of paper, and ash, and rose petals crushed beneath old leather bindings. You turned back once, just once, and saw them still standing there. Callan, pale but still holding his ground. Amari, still unreadable. Then the door folded closed behind you, and you were alone. At first, there was nothing. Just the scent and the quiet, so thick you could feel the shape of it against your ears. You held your wand aloft, whispering lumos, and a soft sphere of light flared to life at the tip. You were in a narrow hallway. The walls on either side were carved with script, not in English, not in Latin, but in something older. Runes with spirals and strokes that turned in on themselves like eyes refusing to blink. You passed them slowly, the light from your wand flickering across the letters. They didn't shine, but shimmered. You realized they were not carved into the wall. They were beneath it, trapped under a layer of stone like insects caught in amber. As you walked, the light began to change. First, it dimmed. Then it shifted, warmer, gold-toned. And then you saw that it wasn't from your wand anymore. There were candles now, hanging in midair. No sound accompanied their arrival. No flicker of magic. Just presence, sudden and seamless. They lined both sides of the corridor, their flames unmoving, as if the air were too still to allow even a whisper of wind. And then the voices began. Whispers. Names. Not spoken aloud, but inside you. The way dreams speak in your own voice even when they aren't yours. Rhiannon. Corvus. Elson. Viral. Names that meant nothing to you, and yet ached with familiarity. As if somewhere, in another life, they had belonged to you. Or you to them. You stopped walking. The wall to your left shimmered faintly. A section of stone peeled back, revealing a small alcove. Inside was a mirror. No frame. No glass. Just reflection, floating in the stone like water. You looked into it. And for a moment, you saw yourself. But not as you were. Older. Eyes darker. Robes faded, stained with ink and ash. You were holding something, not a wand, but a quill made of bone. And around your neck, a pendant shaped like the rune from the book. Then the image shifted. You were gone, replaced by a hooded figure. No face, but burning eyes. A hand reached toward the mirror, and though you didn't move, you felt it graze your chest. You stumbled back. The whispering stopped. The candles dimmed. And in the silence that followed, the corridor opened into a vast circular chamber. Books, thousands of them, suspended in air, orbiting the room in slow, silent spirals. Some were open, their pages fluttering as if breathing. Others were bound with chains. One was wrapped in vines that glowed faintly blue. And in the center of the chamber, beneath a ceiling painted like a night sky, stood a pedestal. Not empty this time. Upon it, a quill. A single feather, dipped in ink that shimmered like stars. Behind it, a figure. You couldn't see them clearly, cloaked in shadow, but you felt them watching. Waiting. The air vibrated with unspoken questions. You had stepped beyond a door that remembered you. And now, something wanted you to remember it. The figure did not move, not even as you stepped deeper into the chamber. Their presence, however, moved through the room like an unseen tide, slow, inevitable, brushing across your skin and beneath your thoughts. The air itself felt heavier, as if filled with stories too long untold. You stood at the edge of the circular chamber, the stone beneath your feet smooth and silent, without dust or debris. It was impossibly clean, not the sterile sort of a freshly swept corridor, but the untouched stillness of a place outside time. No footprints, no flickering cobwebs. Only you, the silent stranger, and the books that floated like dreams in orbit above and around. There were thousands of them, books in every size and shape you could imagine. Some looked impossibly old, their pages yellowed and wrinkled like dried leaves. Others had no visible pages at all, only covers made of glistening materials that resembled water, or smoke, or cooled lava. They moved in silence, drifting as if pulled by currents invisible to the eye. You caught glimpses of runes on some of them, symbols glowing faintly like embers within frost. And at the heart of this great floating constellation of forgotten knowledge stood the pedestal. Upon it, the quill. Its feather was unlike any you had ever seen. At first glance, it was white, pure, bright, but when your eyes lingered, you noticed the subtle gradients shifting within it. Pale gold near the base, the softest violet across the veins, and at the tip, ink as dark as the sea at night. It shimmered slightly, even though no wind stirred. The figure beside it remained cloaked, face concealed beneath the deep shadows of a hood. No light touched them, but you knew they were not a statue, nor an illusion. Their presence was undeniable. When you finally stepped forward, the stone did not echo beneath you. Your own footsteps became soundless, absorbed by the room's immense stillness. The closer you moved to the center, the stronger the feeling grew that this place was not part of Hogwarts as you knew it. It was older. Underneath the school, yes, but also outside it, in a space folded in between magic and memory. The quill pulsed faintly. The figure raised their hand, gloved, long-fingered, and gestured toward it. You hesitated. "Do I write?" you asked aloud, though your voice barely rose above a whisper. The figure tilted their head slightly, the gesture slow, almost avian. You couldn't see a face, but you felt a gaze settle over you, soft and immense, like being looked at by a mountain. You stepped closer. Your fingers brushed the stem of the quill. It was warm, and as soon as your skin made contact, the world breathed. Not you. Not the room. Everything. A single breath, drawn deep into the roots of the earth and exhaled into the stars. Your vision blurred, and the books stopped. They froze in place, each one turning to face inward, toward you. The quill lifted from the pedestal of its own accord and hovered before you. The inkwell shimmered into being beside it, deep, bottomless, like a pool of night. Then the whisper came again. Not from outside you, but from deep within your chest, like a heartbeat you've forgotten how to hear. "Read the name." "What name?" you whispered. "The name you left behind." You looked down. The parchment on the pedestal was no longer blank. A circle of runes had formed on its surface, similar to the one in the book from the restricted section, but not the same. These were subtler, thinner, woven into one another with fractal complexity. At the center, a space had opened. Empty. Waiting. The quill floated, patient. You did not yet understand. But your hand moved anyway. And you wrote. Your fingers guided by something not memory, but recognition. A name. Not your own, but one that belonged to you nonetheless. Velrun. As the final stroke curled into place, the ink flared gold. The chamber shook, but not violently. It was more like the deep stirring of something shifting in its sleep. The books resumed their motion, now faster, more deliberate. Pages fluttered open and closed, covers glowed, symbols aligned and rearranged themselves midair. And the figure moved. They stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, and with each step, the shadows receded, revealing more of their form. Robes of midnight blue, trim stitched in silver thread. No wand, no staff. And when the hood finally fell back, you saw a face like carved moonstone. Not aged, not youthful, smooth and calm. Their eyes were closed, yet you felt their vision upon you. They opened their mouth, and the voice that emerged did not touch your ears, but slipped straight into your spine. The name has returned. The key has stirred. You opened your mouth to speak, but they raised a single hand. You are the fifth to write it. The first in centuries. The others have faded. But you remember. And so, the archive remembers you. The archive. Of course. You had not stepped into a mere chamber of forgotten books. You were standing within the living heart of a memory vault. One layered into the bones of Hogwarts itself, tucked between its secrets and its spells. The figure gestured to the space behind them, and another door unfolded from the stone. It shimmered like a reflection on a pond, revealing another room, but smaller, rounder, filled with light that did not come from any visible source. On its walls were mirrors. Dozens. Each one slightly different in size and frame. Some etched with runes, others cracked. "Is that where the spell is?" you asked quietly. The figure didn't nod, didn't speak, but the answer settled in your mind nonetheless. No, that is where the spell remembers you. You stepped toward the threshold. The air there was thinner, more delicate, like silk soaked in incense and the weight of dreams. You could smell roses again, deep, blooming, edged with fire. Before you passed through, you turned to look back at the quill. It hovered still, its ink trailing soft mist into the air. And on the parchment, below the name, more words had appeared. Not in your handwriting. To speak what was silenced is to wake what was sleeping. To wake it is to be seen. The meaning sank in slowly, like ink through old vellum. This was not a simple spell. It was a summoning. And something was listening. As you stepped into the chamber of mirrors, the door behind you whispered shut. And the archive exhaled once more. Not in welcome, but in memory. The past was waking, and it had not forgotten you. The door behind you dissolved, not closed, not locked, but quietly gone, as though it had never been part of the stone to begin with. What remained was the hush. It was not silence, not entirely. There was still the faint hum, the echo of magic breathing through the walls, like wind through a library that had forgotten what time felt like. The chamber you stepped into was smaller, circular like the last, but unlike the grand archive, this space felt intimate. The air was thick with warmth and candlelight, though no candles burned. The light was ambient, soft and golden, like early evening in autumn when the sun hides just behind the trees. Mirrors lined the walls. There were perhaps 24, maybe more, tall, narrow, ornate. Some stood free, leaning slightly like they'd been placed there in a hurry. Others were embedded in the wall, framed with wood or bone or etched metal. They reflected your image, but not quite as you were. The first mirror you passed showed you older. Not aged, but matured, lines of wisdom around your eyes, hair longer. You wore different robes. There was a medal or a charm stitched to your collar, something unfamiliar. The second mirror gave you a different future still. This time you held no one at all, only a book pressed tightly to your chest, your hands ink-stained and trembling, your eyes a little haunted. Every mirror offered a you, and yet not you. Not illusions. Not fantasies. Possibilities. Echoes of self spun from the decisions you hadn't made or hadn't yet. Then, halfway around the room, a mirror stopped you cold. It didn't reflect anything. Not you, not the chamber. Just darkness. Not blackness, but depth. It was like looking into a well where no bottom could be found, a space so vast it bent perception around it. As you stepped closer, your skin prickled, your magic stirred. Something in the core of your wand tugged. And then the mirror whispered. Not loud. Not sudden. Just a breath in your ear, as if someone stood just behind your shoulder. Why did you leave us? You turned sharply. No one there. The whisper was not the mirror itself, you realized, but a memory within it. The voice had been soft, familiar, not yours, but close. A friend. A sibling? You couldn't place it, and yet it rooted itself behind your ribs like a seed pressing toward bloom. You reached toward the mirror. But something stopped you. It was not fear. It was a presence. Gentle, but firm. You turned, and there she stood. Liz. You stared at her, stunned. She was supposed to be back in the common room, still wrapped in a blanket of irritation and distant thoughts. But she looked calm here, her arms crossed, eyes sharp as ever. How? You started. I followed, she said simply. You didn't really think you could sneak off into the forbidden section and not leave crumbs for a reader, did you? There was a flicker of amusement in her voice. Then, seriousness. Amari sent me. Said you need someone who could read what you wouldn't. You blinked. But the door opened, she said, stepping past you, examining the mirrors with practiced detachment. Only for a moment. Just enough for me. I think it wanted me to come. She stopped before one of the other mirrors. Her own reflection blinked back, but with tears in its eyes. Liz tilted her head. Their memory wells, she murmured. Not just mirrors. Mirrors don't choose what to show you. You looked back at the depthless mirror. What does it want from me? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped toward you, handed you something small, a shard of glass, no larger than a coin, but faintly glowing. This was in the archive, she said. The moment your name hit that parchment, it rose from the floor. You held it up. The glow inside the shard pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. And when you brought it near the dark mirror, it flared. The mirror responded. Ripples of soft golden light spread across its surface, and suddenly, it began to form. Shapes moved inside. A landscape emerged, forests, towers, a lake reflecting too many moons. You recognized none of it, and yet the feeling returned, something here knew you. Then, you saw them. 3 figures, standing at the edge of the lake. One tall, cloaked. One kneeling. One with their back turned. The air in the chamber shifted. You stepped closer, and the mirror pulled you. Not violently, not even with magic. Just a feeling, a warmth so deep it coaxed your body forward, step by slow, dreamlike step, until your fingertips brushed the surface, and the world bent. Not like breaking glass, not like falling, like stepping through breath. For a moment, all sensation vanished. There was no cold, no sound, just a floating stillness, the press of memory without thought. And then your feet touched stone, not the archive. You stood now on the banks of a great black lake under a violet sky, where stars fell upward like rain in reverse. Trees lined the shore, but their leaves glowed faintly blue. The three figures from the mirror were there, but only one remained solid. The other two faded into mist, as if they'd only been placeholders in an echo. The remaining figure turned. Not Liz, not Amari, but you. Older, weary, holding the same quill from the pedestal. And they smiled. "I've been waiting," they said. "You took longer this time. You didn't speak. You couldn't." They stepped forward, reached into their robe, and pulled out a book bound in metal-threaded cloth. "It's your story," they said, "but only the first half. You left it behind the last time." You hesitated, reaching for it. As your fingers touched the cover, the world shimmered again. You awoke, if it could be called that, still standing, back in the mirror chamber. The book was in your hands now. Liz was gone. The mirror was once again empty, but the shards still glowed in your palm. From somewhere beyond the chamber, a door creaked open, not the archive entrance, but another, hidden in shadow. And the scent that drifted through was sharp and strange. Smoke, cedar, and blood. The next step was waiting, and it would not wait long. The scent hit you first. Not the acrid burn of fresh smoke, but something deeper, like ancient wood smoldering beneath the surface of the world. Cedar, old and heavy with memory, mingled with something coppery, sharp. The metallic scent of blood, but distant, like a whisper left over from something already finished. It wrapped around your senses slowly, the way mist curls along the hem of a forest before dawn. You turned from the mirror, the book still cradled in your arms. Its weight was not burdensome, but it felt true, anchored. The metal-threaded cloth of its cover warmed against your fingers, as though recognizing you, or perhaps acknowledging your return. The door was ajar. Not visible until now, hidden in the shadowed curve of the chamber, where the light refused to settle. Its edges were charred, the stone frame around it scorched as if by magical fire, though the surrounding air remained cool. Beyond it, only darkness. You stepped forward. Your foot crossed the threshold, and the light changed. No longer the amber hush of the mirror chamber. Here, it was silver, thin, tinged with blue. It emanated from small crystals embedded in the ceiling above, pulsing faintly like sleeping fireflies. You found yourself walking along a narrow corridor carved from deep black stone, veins of magic glowing faintly beneath its surface. The walls were etched with moving script, thin silver letters that danced and twisted as you passed, like ink shifting across a page. You didn't recognize the language, but the letters felt familiar. Some part of your mind tried to match their motion to sounds, but the meaning stayed just out of reach, like a dream slipping through your fingers. As you walked, you became aware of the silence again, not empty, but full. Full of something watching. The pressure grew, gently, like the tide rising around your ankles. You clutched the book tighter. It throbbed once against your chest, alive, maybe, or simply reactive. You couldn't tell the difference anymore. Then, a voice. Not ahead. Not behind. Inside. You were not meant to wake this story. It wasn't a warning. It was sorrow. You stopped. Looked around. Nothing changed. The corridor continued ahead, subtly curving downward. You kept walking. The stones beneath your feet shifted in color, gray to indigo, then to rust red. The scent of cedar deepened. You passed carvings now, not just letters. Scenes. Stories. Figures cloaked in robes, some faceless, others with eyes like mirrors. In one, a figure raised a wand not in power, but in offering, surrounded by serpents with wings. In another, a woman dissolved into ink, her body becoming script on the wind. You couldn't help but wonder, were these memories? Warnings? Or merely reflections of choices unmade? You reached the end of the corridor, where the path opened into a chamber unlike any you had seen. It was shaped like a flower, 6 petals of stone spiraling outward from a central circle. Each petal was a room of its own, lined with walls that seemed alive, pulsing with light. In the center, a plinth. Upon it, a mirror. But this one was shattered. Its pieces floated midair, suspended like stars. Each shard reflected a different image, flashes of movement, color, faces. None lingered long enough to identify, but all carried the same eerie familiarity. You stepped into the circle, and the floating shards stilled. Then, chose. 3 of them broke away from the orbit, slowly drifting toward you. The first hovered before your eyes. It showed Amari, but not the Amari you knew. This version of him stood before a vast forest lit by violet fire. His expression unreadable, lips moving in silent incantation. Around him, the trees twisted unnaturally, as though reacting to his presence, bending toward him. In his hand, not a wand, but a feathered quill. The same as yours. The image vanished. The second shard floated closer. Callan. He stood alone in a ruined courtyard, under heavy rain. His robes were torn, and his wand, still broken, sparked weakly in his hand. But his eyes glowed, brighter than any wand light. He screamed something, at the sky? At someone unseen, and the stone beneath him cracked, magic rippling out in violent, chaotic rings. Again, it faded. The third shard reached you. Liz. She sat at a long table, somewhere deep within the library. Around her, books levitated in strange, synchronized orbits. Her fingers traced runes carved into the air itself. But she wasn't alone. Across from her sat you. An older version. Laughing. The sound didn't reach your ears, but you recognized the ease, the comfort. The feeling of something lost, now found. This shard lingered longer than the others. Then, like the rest, it dissolved into mist. You stood in the center of the chamber, breath shallow. The book in your arms was warm again. You opened it. The pages within were blank except the first. And on that page, something new had written itself. The spell is not words, nor power. It is choice, memory, intention. Below it, only those who remember who they are can wield what was forgotten. You didn't understand all of it, but you felt it, like a thread pulling tight. The mirrors, the quill, the names. This wasn't about casting a spell in the usual sense. It was about calling something back, something that had been lost not just in time, but in self. The chamber's light dimmed. Then, from one of the petal-shaped rooms, you heard a sound. Soft. Like breathing. Not human. Something deeper. Heavier. Alive. You stepped toward the sound. The room you entered was lined not with mirrors or books, but with feathers. Thousands of them, pinned to the walls. Some white, some black, some iridescent, shifting color with each movement. In the center, a pedestal, and on it, a second quill. This one was dark as onyx, but shimmered with threads of crimson and silver. Its magic pulsed like a heartbeat, and you understood instantly. This was the twin. Not a copy. Not a lesser version. Its counterpart. You reached toward it, but a voice stopped you. Not from within. Not from memory. A real voice. Behind you. You found it, Amari said. You turned. He stood at the entrance to the feathered chamber, his face unreadable in the dim light. Shadows curled around his boots like smoke. How? You began, again. He shrugged slightly. Callan wouldn't let me stay behind. And I remembered something. You stared at him. He stepped forward, gaze resting on the quill. I think we're all part of this, he said quietly. But you're the one who has to decide. You looked back down. The quill trembled in anticipation. One more step, and everything might change. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. A choice. Your fingers reached. The air around the pedestal shifted. And from deep within the stone, something began to wake. The air in the chamber held stillness like breath before a word, taut, trembling, filled with the hush of something older than magic. Your fingers hovered above the onyx quill, and even without touching it, you could feel the pulse of memory embedded within its sleek form. The crimson-silver shimmer across its barbs moved like blood beneath skin. Behind you, Amari watched without speaking. He was a statue in shadow, his presence no longer distant but deeply woven into the moment. The gravity of the room bent toward the pedestal, as if the whole world waited to exhale. You closed your hand slowly around the quill. It was warm. Not like fire, but like a hand in yours, recognizing you, greeting you. The moment your skin met the feather, light broke from the ceiling. Not harsh. Not blinding. Just a bloom of pale illumination that melted the darkness from the corners of the chamber. The feathers lining the walls rustled gently, stirred by a wind that came from nowhere. The quill pulsed again. A thread of silver light wound itself from its tip and trailed upward, looping gently in the air before you. Letters formed, not on parchment, but in the air itself. Ancient script. Familiar now. You couldn't read it with your eyes, but yourself understood. Not a translation, but a knowing. This was the beginning of the spell. It had already begun. From the entrance, you heard footsteps. 2 more figures entered the chamber, Callan, his cloak askew and eyes wide, and Liz, her brows furrowed in concentration, one already drawn but not raised. They said nothing. They didn't need to. They'd seen what you'd seen, felt what you'd felt. Liz approached the pedestal from one side. She extended her hand, not to touch the quill, but to press her fingers against the smooth stone. Lines of light burst from her touch, spidering out across the floor like veins, linking to the feathered walls, the pedestal, the air itself. Callan stood on the other side, his broken one held in his fist, trembling slightly. But when he stepped forward, the wand sparked, not weakly this time, but with intention. As though it, too, remembered something. Amari came to stand beside you. He held the book you'd nearly forgotten in your hand. The spell isn't cast, he said quietly. It's called. That's what this has always been about. You looked at him. He met your gaze, steady. You have to speak its name. But I don't know it, you said, your voice thin, distant in your ears. You do, said Liz, stepping into the circle of light. You've always known it. It's written in what you remember. Not what's in your mind. What's in your heart. The floating quill lifted slightly from your palm, hovering in the air between the 4 of you now. The silver thread it had begun continued to spiral, weaving a circle overhead, its motion steady, reverent. And you did know. Not a word. Not a syllable. A name. Not of a person. Of a truth. Of a spell so old it had become forgotten, not because it was forbidden, but because it had become part of everything. Woven into language, into breath, into the way you reach for someone in fear, or joy, or sorrow. A spell that remembered you. And so you spoke. One word. Not in English, not in Latin, but in a language without language, a word that felt like the softest memory of a mother's voice, the echo of laughter beneath stars, the smell of parchment warmed by firelight, the crack of one light shared between friends in dark corridors. As you spoke, the air shifted. The quill blazed with light, no longer crimson and silver, but white so pure it bent color around it. The floating letters burned gold, then dissolved like stardust. The feathers on the walls quivered violently, then released themselves, fluttering through the air like birds newly woken. And the spell answered. Not with explosion, not with light, but with unfolding. Like a bloom in slow motion, the chamber stretched outward, not in size, but in sense. You felt the walls fall away, the weight of stone become the weight of memory, of time. You stood now not in a room but in a space between. Before you, the air shimmered. Figures emerged. Not fully formed. Not ghosts. Not illusions. Reflections. Possibilities. One of them was you, from the mirror chamber, older, wiser, smiling. Another was Amari, robed in deep green, standing at the edge of a cliff, arms raised to the sky. Liz, surrounded by books not yet written. Callan, one remade, eyes clear. And others. Dozens. Hundreds. All of them you and not you. Lives not lived. Choices not taken. Futures still possible. They did not speak. They only watched. Then, from behind them, she appeared. Tall. Pale. Cloaked in ink and silver. Her eyes mirrored the stars. Her hair flowed like smoke. The keeper of the spell. The one who had waited. Child of memory, she said, her voice like parchment turning. You have brought it home. What is it? You whispered. The spell of self, she replied. The spell that remembers. And then she raised her hand, and you saw the second quill, twin to yours, now gleaming in her grasp. The two feathers pulsed once in harmony. And then, they merged. A rush of wind that wasn't wind tore through the chamber. Not destroying. Restoring. The spell completed not a transformation, but a return. A remembering. You staggered backward, eyes wide as visions flashed across your vision. The first library, where the spell was written in flame. A boy with no name teaching it to a friend by candlelight. A keeper watching from the stars as every bearer of the quill forgot its purpose. Until now. Until you. You awoke on the floor of the forbidden section, the book in your lap. The quill gone. The mirrors quiet. Liz, Callan, and Amari beside you, their breathing soft, their expressions peaceful. Around you, the library was unchanged. And yet, the light was warmer. The air, kinder. A gentle voice in your chest whispered, you are not lost. You were never lost. You stood together, for students in robes, tired and changed. I don't think it's over, Callan said. No, Amari agreed. But it's begun again. And Liz, always watching, always reading, nodded once. We remembered. That's enough. You stepped out of the forbidden section, back into the quiet halls of Hogwarts. Somewhere, a clock chimed softly. The stars beyond the windows seemed to shimmer in time with your breath. And as you walked, you carried not the quill, not the book, but the spell inside you. Not for power, not for glory, but for memory, and for the stories still to be written. Thank you for joining me in tonight's story. As the last words settle in your mind, feel the quiet embrace of the night, wrapping you in warmth and calm. Let the gentle hum of the world fade into the background, knowing that you are safe, you are grounded, and you are exactly where you need to be. The mysteries of the story will rest with you, like a soft, comforting blanket, keeping you company as you drift deeper into peaceful dreams. Remember, tomorrow will come with new light, new stories, and new possibilities. But for now, allow yourself to let go. Let the weight of the day slip away and surrender to rest. Good night, dear friend. May your dreams be full of magic, wonder, and all the things that make your heart feel at ease. Sleep well.